Hi everyone, so today we're going to be talking about composition of functions, and composition of functions just is a way to plug equations inside of each other. We use this a lot when we're trying to, really just plugging equations into each other. So before we start on examples, I'm going to give you two equations. The first equation is f of x equals 4x plus 5. And then, I don't need that. And then the second equation is g of x equals x squared minus 1. Now, what we're going to do with these two equations is use them, plug them inside of each other, plug them inside of themselves. It gets kind of complicated, but it's not too crazy. So let's just start with some examples. The first example looks like GOF 5. So another way to write this is just there's a couple of different ways that you can write these. And another way to write this would be GF5. So notice that these are kind of, the letters and numbers are kind of nesting inside of each other. And what we're going to do, the way that I like to do it is I like to rewrite it like this first. And then kind of go from the inside and work my way out. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, what I'm doing is taking this 5 and I'm plugging it into this f equation. So my f of 5 is when I plug 5 into my f equation. So that's the same thing as saying 4 times 5 plus 5, because all I did was replace the x with the 5 in my f equation. And what that gives me is 25. Okay, so now I know f of 5 is 25. So I can rewrite this equation right here as, instead of g of f of 5, I would write g of, because I know f of 5 is 25, I'm going to say 25. So now it looks actually pretty simple, because now what that tells me is that I'm going to take the 25 and plug it into my g equation. So if I plug that into my g equation for my x, I would have 25 squared minus 1. And now all I have to do is plug that into a calculator, and I get 25 squared minus 1, 624. So this is my final answer. These are all kind of like two-step problems, so you have to start from the inside, do the first equation, then plug it into the outside equation. So let's go through another example. Sorry, I switched to red. Let's go back to white. Number 2. And number 2 is FOF of -2. Now, this is the same thing. So I can rewrite this as f of -2. Even though we're using the same equation, you are still doing the same thing. So I'm going to, now let's use blue. So now I'm going to start with this inside, which is f of -2. So I'm going to just rewrite that over here, f of -2, which means that I'm going to plug -2 into my f equation. So I'd have 4 times -2 plus 5, which gives me -3. So now I know that f of -2 is equal to -3. So I can rewrite this whole equation as just saying instead of f of -2, I'm going to replace that with -3, because that's what I know it equals. So now all I have to do is find out what f of -3 is, and that's as easy as plugging in -3 into my f equation again. So I'm going to just start with the original f equation, which is that 4x plus 5, but replace the x with a -3 this time. And I get -7. So, and that's my answer, because that was the last step. Like I said, you only have to do 2 steps for all of these. Okay, so those ones are with numbers, and the numbers actually tend to be a little bit easier. But let's go through some ones that don't have any numbers, and they're just x letters. So the third example is FOG of x. And once again, we're going to rewrite it so that it's FG x. This time we're going to start with this middle one, which is g of x, right? I'm just going to, actually, let's go back up here and bring these equations down so that we can see them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just start with my gx equation and rewrite it. So I know g of x is equal to x squared minus 1. Well, if I know that g of x is equal to x squared minus 1, potentially what I could do is replace the gx in this equation right here with x squared minus 1. So I can rewrite that equation as f, but instead of writing gx, I'm going to write x squared minus 1. And so what that tells me is that I'm going to replace the x in my f equation with x squared minus 1. So I'm going to rewrite my f equation, but instead of putting x there, I'm going to put x squared minus 1. And then all I have to do from there is simplify. So to simplify, I'm going to distribute the 4, and I get 4x squared minus 4, and then a plus 5. And then I'm going to combine like terms, which are the negative 4 and the 5, because they both don't have x's on them. So I'd get 4x squared plus 1, and that's my final answer. So when you don't have numbers in them, you're not going to just get a number for an answer. Obviously, you're going to get something with letters and numbers. But once again, it's the same thing. So you're taking an equation. Instead of taking a number and plugging it in, you're taking an equation and plugging it in. Let's go through one more example. And this one is GOF of x, which once again I can rewrite as G of f of x. And I'm just going to underline these guys so that we remember where they're at. So I'm going to start with the f of x. I'm just going to rewrite my f of x equation so I can see it, which is 4x plus 5. And now I know, if I know f of x is 4x plus 5, what that tells me is I can replace the fx in this equation with 4x plus 5, which means I can write that as g of 4x plus 5. And what that tells me is that what I'm going to do is take my g equation, which is x squared minus 1, but replace the x with 4x plus 5. So I'm going to write 4x plus 5 where the x would have gone. And now what I have to do is simplify that. So when I have something squared and there's a plus or a minus in there, that tells me that I'm going to FOIL. Last year we did some foiling, so when I FOIL, I'm going to say 4x plus 5, 4x plus 5, because that squared right there tells me that it happens twice, so I have to write it out twice. Then when we FOIL, we're going to do the first two numbers multiplied, or first two chunks together, and that gives me 16x squared. Then we do the outside chunks. 4x times 5 gives me a 20x. Then the inside chunks, 5 times 4x also gives me a 20x. And then we do 5 times 5, which gives me a 25. Now that was just this part, so there's this extra minus 1 right there. I'm going to just tack on. Now we can combine like terms. We've got a 20x and a 20x, and then we've got a 25 and a negative 1. So our final answer would be 16x squared plus 20x plus 20x is 40x. And then 25 minus 1 is 24. That is my final answer. And there we have it, composition of functions.